How did you get revenge when your cousin ruined your wedding dress? My cousin Lila had always been jealous. She lived off drama, thrived on being the center of attention, and whenever I had a milestone, she found a way to sour it. When I got engaged, she rolled her eyes and said, "Finally. I thought you'd end up alone." When people complimented my fiancé, she'd whisper, "He's not that cute in real life." I should have known she'd try something on my wedding day. The night before the ceremony, my bridal suite was buzzing with nerves and laughter. I left my wedding dress hanging safely in the room while I went down to help my mom with some last-minute details. When I returned, the bottom of my gown, my perfect, custom-made gown, was ruined. A long streak of red wine stained the hem, soaking through the satin. And there was Lila, sitting on the couch with a fake pout. "Oh no," she said, holding an empty glass. "I tripped, and it spilled. Total accident." Her smirk told me otherwise. I wanted to scream, cry, throw her out. But then something inside me went still. I smiled instead, a slow, calm smile that made her blink. "It's okay, Lila. Accidents happen." She actually looked relieved, like she'd gotten away with it. But if she thought she'd humiliate me on my wedding day, she was dead wrong. The next morning, while the bridesmaids got ready, I watched Lila parade around in her dress. She'd chosen the flashiest gown she could find, emerald green, floor length, with a thigh-high slit she wouldn't stop flaunting. She kept posing in mirrors, adjusting the slit to show more skin. "At least one of us looks like a model," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. That's when the idea came. When she went to the bathroom to reapply her lipstick, I followed. Her dress was draped over the chair. With one tiny snip of the scissors from the makeup kit, I made a small, almost invisible cut at the very top of her slit. Just enough that, with every step, every tug, every little movement, it would grow. By the time we arrived at the ceremony, she was strutting confidently, not knowing her own downfall had already begun. At first, no one noticed. The slit just looked a little higher, but during photos, she bent to adjust her shoe, and writhed. The slit crept higher up her thigh. She yanked at it nervously, tugging to hide it, but the fabric only gave more. By the reception, it was impossible to ignore. Every step across the dance floor, every exaggerated laugh, every attempt to draw attention to herself made the slit climb higher. She tried pinning it with a safety clip from one of the bridesmaids, but when she sat down, the tension tore it wider. Whispers started. Guests pointed. Someone muttered, "Is her dress ripping?" Another whispered, "That slit's about to hit her waist." Lila's face turned red. She tried holding it closed with her clutch, but that only made it more obvious. By dinner, half the room was staring, stifling laughs. By the first dance, even the DJ joked, "Careful out there, we don't need any wardrobe malfunctions." Meanwhile, I walked the room in my pristine white gown. My dress had been saved by a rush alteration that morning, and it looked flawless. Every compliment I received made Lila's humiliation sharper. She had tried to ruin my moment, but instead, she became the night's spectacle. The final blow came when she tripped while carrying her drink, the slit ripping so high it nearly split the entire side seam. As Lila bolted from the ballroom, clutching her ripped dress and burning with humiliation, I thought that would be the end of it. But just as I turned back to my guests, one of the bridesmaids rushed over, pale-faced, whispering in my ear, "You're not going to believe what she just did." Samantha Braden grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the gift table, her phone already out and glowing. She turned the screen toward me and my stomach dropped like I'd been punched. Lila had posted 3 Instagram stories from the parking lot, tagging half our wedding guests with captions about how I deliberately destroyed her dress because I couldn't stand being upstaged. The first post showed her ripped dress with text saying, "When your jealous cousin attacks you at her own wedding." The second was a selfie of her fake crying with mascara running down her face. The third was a video where she was sobbing about how I'd followed her to the bathroom and cut her dress on purpose. I scrolled through the comments already pouring in from confused relatives asking what happened, some taking her side, others defending me and a few just wanting the drama details. My hands shook as I kept reading comment after comment, watching the stories spread in real time. Kyle Causey, the venue coordinator, appeared at my elbow with a worried look on his face. He pulled me aside and explained that Lila had just filed a formal harassment complaint with the venue, claiming I'd assaulted her in the bathroom and destroyed her property. He showed me the written complaint on his clipboard where she'd written that I cornered her, threatened her and deliberately damaged her $1,000 dress. My mom rushed over from across the room, having just seen the posts on her own phone. She grabbed my shoulders and whispered that we needed to handle this quietly before it ruined the family's reputation, but I could see how mortified she was by the whole thing playing out publicly. Her face was pale and her hands were trembling as she kept glancing at her phone where more notifications kept popping up. I spotted my fiancé talking to his groomsmen and pulled him into the back corridor near the kitchen. I told him everything about the scissors, about the tiny cut I'd made, about how I'd snapped after what Lila did to my wedding dress. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tight, and when I finished he said he was disappointed but understood why I'd done it after she'd ruined my dress with wine. We agreed right there that we'd handle this with facts and evidence, not more drama or social media posts. Back in the reception area, Samantha was already screen recording all of Lila's posts and stories on her phone before they could be deleted. She pointed out the timestamps showing Lila had posted these while supposedly fleeing in tears and humiliation, which seemed way too calculated for someone who was genuinely upset. I pulled out my phone and texted Lucinda Carlisle, the alteration specialist who'd saved my dress that morning with emergency repairs. I asked if she could provide a written statement about the wine stain and the rush job she'd had to do. She texted back within seconds saying she'd taken photos of the damage before fixing it and could document everything including the receipt for the emergency service charge. Guests started approaching me with questions about what they'd seen on social media, some holding up their phones to show me Lila's posts. My maid of honor jumped in like a bodyguard, steering people back toward the dance floor and telling them everything was fine while I kept a neutral smile plastered on my face. One of my aunts tried to corner me near the cake table, but the maid of honor intercepted her and guided her toward the bar instead. Kyle returned about 20 minutes later to inform me that according to venue policy, they needed to know if I wanted to bar Lila from re-entering the property for the rest of the evening. He explained that this could escalate things legally but would prevent any further disruption to the reception. I looked around at my guests dancing and laughing, at my new husband chatting with his family, at the beautiful reception we'd planned for months. I made the decision to meet Lila briefly in the hallway outside the ballroom with Samantha present as a witness to try to address this before it spiraled completely out of control. The three of us walked out into the hallway and I immediately saw Lila had her phone up, recording everything while tears streaked her makeup. She started yelling about assault and property damage while pointing at her ruined dress that she'd wrapped a tablecloth around. Samantha stayed calm beside me, holding her own phone steady to capture everything Lila was saying. My cousin kept changing her position to get better angles for her video, stepping back and forth while shouting accusations about jealousy and how I couldn't handle not being the prettiest one at my own wedding. I took a deep breath and told her we could both delete our posts and handle this privately if she'd just stop recording. She laughed and said everyone deserved to know what kind of person I really was. Kyle stood nearby taking notes on his clipboard while Lila kept ranting about lawsuits and criminal charges. The photographer walked past us carrying his equipment bag and stopped when he saw the scene. He mentioned he'd been testing lighting shots in the lobby last night and might have caught foot traffic near the bridal suite on his camera. He pulled out his camera and started scrolling through the memory card while we all watched. Within minutes he found several clear shots from the hallway and turned the camera screen toward us. There was Lila walking toward my bridal suite door carrying a full glass of red wine. The timestamp on the photo showed 9:47 p.m., which matched exactly when I'd been downstairs helping my mom with the seating chart. Another photo showed her entering the suite at 9:48 p.m. When I showed Lila the photos on the camera screen, she immediately changed her story and said she was just checking on me. She claimed the wine was for herself and the spill was still totally accidental even though she'd been in my room. Kyle pointed out that her story had changed 3 times in the last 10 minutes. First she'd said she tripped in the room, then she said it happened in the hallway, and now she was saying she was just visiting. My mom appeared in the hallway after someone had gone to get her from the reception. She looked at the photos on the photographer's camera and her face went pale. She told us both to drop this for tonight, but I could see in her eyes that she finally understood this wasn't just cousin drama. She looked exhausted and kept shaking her head while staring at the evidence. I pulled my mom aside and admitted what I'd done to Lila's dress with the scissors. She let out this long, deep sigh and rubbed her temples. She said she was disappointed in me, but acknowledged that what Lila did to my wedding dress first was deliberate sabotage. Her voice sounded tired when she said our family didn't need this kind of fighting. Lila overheard us and started screaming that she was calling the police right now about the property damage to her $1,000 dress. Kyle stepped forward and quietly explained that if police got involved, we'd both likely face charges. He said Lila could be charged for the wine incident and property damage to my dress, while I could face charges for cutting hers. The venue had policies about these situations and he'd seen similar family disputes at weddings before. I looked at my ruined reception, at my new husband trying to keep guests distracted inside, at my mom's exhausted face. I told Kyle I wanted to sign an incident report and formally bar Lila from the property for the rest of the night. It felt harsh, but I needed to protect what was left of my wedding. Kyle pulled out the paperwork and I signed it while Lila screamed that I'd regret this. 2 security guards appeared within minutes and positioned themselves on either side of Lila. She clutched her phone and kept recording while they escorted her toward the exit. Her tablecloth wrap started slipping and she had to grab it with one hand while holding her phone with the other. The guards walked her all the way to the parking lot while she shouted threats about lawsuits and family consequences. Through the window I could see her in the parking lot, still posting to social media from her car. Samantha kept refreshing Lila's profile and taking screenshots of each new post. The stories kept changing with every update, adding new details that hadn't happened and removing parts that made her look bad. In one post I'd apparently attacked her unprovoked, in another I'd been planning this for weeks, and in a third she claimed I'd stolen money from her purse too. Samantha documented everything, creating a folder of screenshots with timestamps showing how Lila's story evolved every few minutes. We could hear music still playing from the reception and guests laughing, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded in the hallway. Kyle finished his paperwork and said he'd file everything with venue management and that security would remain posted to ensure Lila didn't try to return. My mom hugged me and whispered that we'd figure out the family fallout tomorrow, but tonight I should try to enjoy what was left of my reception. I straightened my dress, fixed my hair in the hallway mirror and prepared to walk back into my wedding with my head held high. The ballroom doors felt heavier when I pushed them open, but I kept my smile steady as 200 faces turned toward me. The band had stopped playing and everyone was watching to see what would happen next. I grabbed the microphone from the bandstand and thanked everyone for coming to celebrate with us tonight. I told them how much their love and support meant to us as we started our new life together. People started clapping and the tension in the room seemed to break as guests returned to their conversations and drinks. The band started up again and my husband took my hand for our first dance while everyone formed a circle around us. He pulled me close and whispered that he was proud of how I handled everything tonight. His hand squeezed mine and we both knew tomorrow would bring family drama, but right now we just swayed to our song. The photographer kept snapping pictures and I focused on my husband's face instead of thinking about what just happened in the hallway. When the song ended and people clapped, my mom walked over for the parent dances. She took my hands during our dance and said she was sorry for not keeping Lila under control all these years. Her eyes looked tired and she promised we'd have a family meeting after the honeymoon to set real boundaries. I nodded and we finished the dance while she kept apologizing under her breath about letting things get this bad. My phone buzzed in my dress pocket and I saw a text from my aunt saying the family group chat was blowing up with people taking sides. I quickly typed back asking everyone to please enjoy the party tonight and save any discussions for later. 3 more texts came in immediately, but I shoved the phone back in my pocket without reading them. The maid of honor pulled Kyle aside near the gift table and they started checking to make sure nothing had been touched during all the chaos. They counted the envelopes in the card box and checked that all the wrapped presents were still there. Kyle gave me a thumbs up from across the room, which made me feel better about at least one thing tonight. My phone buzzed again and this time it was an email from Lucinda with photos attached. She'd sent detailed pictures of the wine damage on my dress from this morning along with timestamps from her work log. Her business records showed the emergency alteration charge of $300 and the exact time she'd started working on the repairs at 6 a.m. I forwarded everything to my email archive in case I needed it later for any legal stuff. My husband caught my eye and nodded toward the balcony door, so we slipped outside for some fresh air. The cool night air felt good after the stuffy reception hall and we finally had a chance to talk honestly about everything. He asked if cutting her dress was worth all this drama and I admitted maybe I went too far. We talked about how we'd handle family conflicts in the future and agreed we needed better ways to deal with problems. Neither of us felt great about how tonight went, but at least we were being honest with each other. Back inside, I found the DJ setting up for the next set and asked him to please stop making wardrobe jokes. He looked confused until I explained there was actual family drama behind what happened with my cousin's dress. He apologized immediately and said he thought it was just a funny accident, not a real conflict. He promised to keep things light and fun for the rest of the night without any more dress comments. My phone rang with an unknown number, but when I answered I heard Lila's voice immediately starting to yell. I hung up without saying anything and set my phone to do not disturb mode. The maid of honor saw me looking stressed and took my phone to hold onto for the rest of the night. She slipped it into her purse and told me to go dance and enjoy my wedding. The next few hours passed in a blur of dancing with college friends and family members who genuinely wanted to celebrate with us. My husband's parents stayed on the dance floor the whole time and his mom kept hugging me between songs. My work friends formed a circle for group dances and pulled other guests in to join them. The flower girl and ring bearer were running around the dance floor playing tag while their parents tried to catch them. Despite everything that happened with Lila, these people who really loved us had made the night special. The bartender announced last call and people started gathering their things and saying goodbye. Elderly relatives came over for final hugs and younger cousins took selfies with us. The photographer was packing up his equipment but grabbed a few final shots of our closest friends grouped around us. My dad helped my mom gather the centerpieces she wanted to keep while the venue staff started stacking chairs. As the last guests filtered out and the lights came up in the ballroom, I looked around at the remnants of our wedding. Empty champagne glasses sat on tables and rose petals were scattered across the dance floor. My husband put his arm around me and we walked toward the exit together. Tomorrow would bring more family drama and decisions about how to handle Lila going forward. Tonight though, we'd survived our wedding and were finally married despite my cousin's best efforts to ruin everything. The hotel room phone woke me up at 7 a.m. and when I grabbed my cell to silence it I saw my notification screen completely filled with messages and missed calls. My cousin Rachel had texted me 15 times starting at midnight with screenshots of Lila's Instagram stories where she was claiming I attacked her in the bathroom and destroyed her dress out of jealousy. The posts had been shared by at least 20 family members and each repost added more dramatic details that weren't even true. My Aunt Linda had commented that she always knew I was unstable and my Uncle Bob was asking if we needed to get lawyers involved. I scrolled through Lila's posts and saw she'd taken photos of her ripped dress from multiple angles and added captions about how I couldn't stand being upstaged at my own wedding. My hands started shaking as I read comment after comment from relatives who believed her version without even asking for my side. I woke my husband up and showed him the screen while pulling out my laptop to start typing a response. I wrote out exactly what happened starting with finding my wedding dress destroyed by wine the night before and included the timestamp photos from the photographer showing Lila entering my bridal suite with a full wine glass. I attached Lucinda's invoice for the emergency alterations and her statement about the wine damage she'd repaired that morning. I explained how I cut Lila's dress in retaliation, which was wrong but understandable given what she'd done first. My husband read through my draft and suggested I remove a few angry sentences and add a request for privacy while we sorted this out as a family. We edited it together over room service coffee until we had a clear factual account that didn't sound too defensive or emotional. I sent the message to my parents, his parents, my siblings and the aunts and uncles who seemed most reasonable, avoiding the family group chat where things had already gotten toxic. Within minutes my mom called crying about how embarrassed she was that this was happening publicly and begging me not to make things worse. My phone dinged with an email from Kyle at the venue with their official incident report attached along with security footage stills showing Lila being escorted out. He wrote that while they'd seen plenty of wedding drama over the years, this situation was definitely one for the books and he wanted me to have documentation in case I needed it. I downloaded everything to a folder on my laptop while my husband fielded calls from his confused relatives who were just waking up to the online drama. The family group chat notification showed 97 new messages and when I opened it Lila had posted again claiming the photographer's images were taken out of context and she'd only gone to check on me with wine to calm my pre-wedding nerves. She insisted the spill was completely accidental and that I was making up evidence to cover for my bridezilla behavior that multiple witnesses saw. My cousin James replied asking why she needed a full glass of red wine to calm someone else's nerves and why she didn't get help cleaning it up if it was really an accident. More relatives started questioning her story and pointing out inconsistencies, which made Lila post even more frantically with longer explanations that contradicted her earlier versions. My phone buzzed with a message from Samantha containing an audio file she'd recorded on her phone during the hallway confrontation with Lila. The recording was muffled, but you could clearly hear Lila saying something about planning to teach me a lesson and making sure I knew my place. It wasn't a complete confession, but combined with everything else it was pretty damaging to her victim narrative. I saved the audio file to my evidence folder and forwarded it to my mom, who called back immediately saying we needed to handle this before it destroyed the family. She set up a three-way call for that afternoon between herself, Lila, and me to establish boundaries and find a way forward. When the call connected, Lila immediately started yelling about defamation and threatening to sue me for the dress while I stayed silent and let her rant. My mom tried to mediate, but Lila kept interrupting until I calmly stated that I had security footage, photos, witness statements and audio recordings that proved she deliberately sabotaged my wedding dress. The line went quiet for a moment before Lila started claiming everything was fabricated and taken out of context again. I told her I wouldn't tolerate any more sabotage or public attacks and that she needed to take down the social media posts immediately or I would share all my evidence publicly. After 20 minutes of back and forth, Lila finally agreed to hide her posts but absolutely refused to apologize for the wine incident, still insisting it was accidental despite all evidence. It wasn't the resolution I wanted, but at least the public attacks would stop and family members would stop taking sides online. As soon as the call ended, I went through every social media platform and blocked Lila completely, then texted my mom that I was going no contact with her going forward. My mom protested that family events would be complicated, but I explained that my mental health and my marriage were more important than keeping the peace with someone who tried to ruin my wedding. Over the next 3 days, I methodically compiled everything into a private folder with timestamps and detailed notes about each incident. I organized the photographer's images, Lucinda's documentation, Kyle's incident report, security footage, Samantha's audio recording and screenshots of all Lila's posts and the family responses. I password protected the folder and backed it up to cloud storage just in case Lila decided to escalate things legally or tried to spread more lies in the future. 3 days after the wedding, my husband and I sat at our kitchen table with a stack of thank you cards and the guest list spread between us. We took turns writing notes to everyone who came and made it special for us despite the drama with Lila. My hand cramped after the 20th card, but we kept going because these people deserved our gratitude for sticking through such a crazy night. He wrote to his side of the family while I handled mine, and we both avoided mentioning anything about Lila or her dress in any of the notes. The pile of finished cards grew as we worked through lunch and into the afternoon, stopping only to stretch our fingers and grab more pens when they ran out of ink. That evening I opened my laptop and started putting together a photo album for social media, picking only the best shots where everyone looked happy and the venue looked beautiful. I scrolled through hundreds of images the photographer sent, choosing ones that showed the ceremony, our first dance, the cake cutting and group shots with family and friends. None of the photos showed Lila or any hint of the drama that happened behind the scenes. I typed a simple caption thanking everyone for celebrating with us and posted it to Facebook and Instagram before closing the laptop. Within minutes, likes and comments started pouring in from friends saying how beautiful everything looked and how happy we seemed together. My phone buzzed constantly for the next hour as more people saw the post and shared their own memories from the night. 2 days later, my mom called asking if I could meet her for dinner to talk about how to handle upcoming family events. I drove to the Italian place near her house where she was already waiting in a booth with 2 glasses of water. She looked tired and stressed as she explained that Thanksgiving was coming up and she didn't know how to handle having both Lila and me at the same gathering. We spent an hour going through different options like having 2 separate dinners or me only coming for dessert when Lila would already be gone. Neither of us liked any of the solutions, but we agreed that for now we'd have to work around each other at family events. My mom would let me know in advance if Lila was coming to something, so I could decide whether to attend or not. She hated being put in the middle but understood why I couldn't be around my cousin anymore after everything that happened. The next morning I got an email from Kyle at the venue with an invoice showing a partial credit applied to our final balance. He explained that given the incident and how professionally we handled everything, management approved a goodwill gesture to offset some of the stress we experienced. The credit wasn't huge, but it was enough to cover the cost of the extra security they had to bring in when things got heated. I forwarded the email to my husband, who was surprised they did anything at all since technically the drama wasn't their fault. We decided to write Kyle a thank you note too, since he went above and beyond helping us that night with documentation and keeping things from getting worse. About 2 weeks after the wedding, my aunt called to tell me she'd heard Lila was still talking about what happened to anyone who would listen. Apparently she'd been going to different relatives' houses and telling her version of events, claiming I attacked her unprovoked and ruined her dress out of jealousy. My aunt said most people weren't buying it since Lila kept changing details in her story and couldn't explain why she had wine near my dress in the first place. Without being able to post on social media and rally people online, Lila's audience was limited to whoever she could corner in person. My husband's family had witnessed everything firsthand at the reception and weren't having any of Lila's victim act when she tried reaching out to them. His mom specifically told Lila to stop contacting them after she called trying to get them on her side with some sob story about being bullied. His sister blocked Lila's number after getting multiple texts asking her to convince me to apologize publicly. They'd seen the evidence, watched the whole thing unfold and knew exactly who started the whole mess. The next week I made an appointment with a therapist because I was having trouble sleeping and kept replaying the wedding night in my head. During our first session I told her everything that happened, from finding my ruined dress to cutting Lila's dress to the aftermath with family. She helped me understand that my snap decision to get revenge came from years of built-up frustration with Lila's behavior that I'd never properly addressed. We worked through exercises to help me process the anger and guilt I felt about stooping to her level even though she started it. The therapist gave me tools for setting better boundaries and handling conflict without resorting to revenge in the future. I went every week for 2 months, slowly working through not just the wedding incident but years of family dynamics that led to that point. 3 months after the wedding, right before Thanksgiving, my cousin James texted saying Lila had asked him to reach out to see if we could move past everything for the holidays. I thought about it for a day then texted James back thanking him, but explaining that I wasn't ready to have any contact with Lila. He understood and said he'd pass along the message without taking sides in the situation. My mom called later that week to discuss holiday plans since I'd made it clear I wouldn't attend anything if Lila was there. She arranged for 2 separate Thanksgiving dinners, one on Thursday with Lila's side of the family and one on Friday with just us and my siblings. It meant twice the cooking and hosting for her, but she said my well-being was more important than keeping up appearances. Christmas worked the same way with split celebrations, so we never had to cross paths. Over the next few months the family slowly adjusted to this new reality where Lila and I existed in completely separate spheres. Some relatives thought I was being too harsh and should forgive and forget for the sake of family harmony. But the ones who knew the full story, who'd seen the evidence or witnessed the reception chaos, understood why I needed to stay away from someone who deliberately tried to ruin my wedding day. My husband started making us breakfast together every Sunday morning after the wedding, something we never had time for before, and during those quiet mornings we'd talk through everything from dealing with difficult relatives to our future plans. He'd crack eggs while I made coffee and we'd strategize about upcoming family events, figuring out exit plans if things got uncomfortable and code words to signal when we needed to leave. One morning about 3 weeks after the wedding he surprised me with tickets to a comedy show, saying we deserved to laugh at something that wasn't family drama for once. We went that Friday night, and when the comedian made jokes about crazy wedding stories, my husband squeezed my hand and whispered that ours would win any contest hands down. The next weekend we started what became our monthly game nights with just the friends who'd really supported us through the wedding chaos. Samantha came over with her boyfriend and a bottle of wine, joking that she should charge people to document their family drama since she'd gotten so good at screen recording and taking notes during our situation. She pulled out her phone to show us she'd actually kept all the screenshots and recordings organized in a folder labeled evidence just in case we ever needed them again. Her boyfriend laughed and said she'd been telling him the whole story in installments like it was a Netflix series, complete with dramatic reenactments of Lila's dress falling apart. We played board games until 2 in the morning, ordered pizza, and nobody mentioned the wedding drama after the first hour. About 6 months later I ran into my mom's friend at the grocery store and she mentioned she'd heard Lila had gotten into a huge fight with her book club about some fundraiser money going missing. The friend said Lila had accused everyone else of stealing before they found out she'd just forgotten to deposit the checks, but by then half the group had quit in frustration. I just nodded and changed the subject to the weather, feeling relieved that Lila's drama was someone else's problem now. My mom called me a few weeks after that to say Lila had been asking around the family about whether I'd forgiven her yet, apparently testing the waters for the upcoming holidays. I told my mom I appreciated her checking, but my answer hadn't changed and wouldn't be changing anytime soon. She understood and started planning 2 separate Thanksgiving dinners again without complaint. On our first anniversary, my husband surprised me by having all our wedding photos professionally framed and hung throughout our apartment. The pictures were stunning and you really couldn't tell my dress had been damaged at all thanks to Lucinda's amazing emergency alterations. There was one photo of me laughing with Samantha and my other bridesmaids where we all looked so genuinely happy, and another of my husband and me during our first dance where we're both smiling despite everything that had happened earlier. The photographer had even caught a candid shot of Kyle helping direct guests away from the drama, which we sent him a copy of with a thank you note. Looking at those photos made me realize how many people had rallied around us that night to make sure we still had a beautiful wedding. My husband pointed out that the people in those happy photos were the same ones we saw regularly now, while the people who'd sided with Lila or stayed neutral had pretty much faded from our lives. We hosted our first big dinner party about 14 months after the wedding, inviting only the people who'd proven themselves real friends through everything. Everyone brought dishes to share and we ate on our tiny balcony even though it was cramped because the weather was perfect. Someone mentioned they'd seen Lila at a mall recently and she'd been arguing loudly with a sales clerk about a return policy until security had to get involved. We all just shook our heads and moved on to talking about vacation plans and job updates and normal life stuff. My husband and I had started this thing where whenever we faced any kind of conflict or difficult decision, we'd ask each other what approach would be the opposite of how Lila would handle it. It became our inside joke but also genuinely helped us communicate better and tackle problems as a team instead of creating drama. When his cousin tried to start trouble at a family barbecue by bringing up old grievances, we just looked at each other, made our polite excuses and left within 15 minutes. No scene, no arguments, just a calm exit and a stop for ice cream on the way home. We took a vacation to the mountains about 18 months after the wedding, just the 2 of us in a cabin with no cell service and no family drama. We hiked every morning, cooked simple meals together and played cards by the fireplace at night. On our last day there my husband said the whole Lila situation had actually been a weird blessing because it forced us to get really good at being a united team right from the start of our marriage. I had to agree because we'd learned to set boundaries, communicate clearly and protect our peace before we'd even finished writing wedding thank you notes. Now we host monthly potlucks where the only rule is no drama allowed. We take weekend trips whenever we need to recharge and we spend holidays with people who actually bring joy to our lives instead of stress.